Welcome back. Now, he was hailed by Elvis as the greatest singer in the world, but behind the professional success, rock and roll legend Roy Orbison's life was marred by tragedy.
Now, nearly 30 years since his death, a new documentary uses never-before-seen home videos to paint an intimate portrait of his devotion as a father and sheds new light on the man behind those ever-present dark sunglasses.
We're going to talk to his son, Alex Orbison, in a moment. Good morning.
Morning, Alex.
First, though, let's take a look at another of Roy's sons describing what he was like as a dad.
We were the only people, besides Elvis and Johnny Cash, that had a satellite dish. We had motorcycles, go-karts, whatever kind of fad came along in the 70s. We had a kiddie pool, and when we changed it to a permanent pool, we were left with all these pipes, and we would use those pipes to shoot bottle rockets at the boats that passed by. And Alex and I were out there shooting at the boats. Dad came out, and we thought he was going to be mad at us, and he snuck down behind us and started shooting bottle rockets at the boats too.
He always had attached to him this sad man of rock and roll, or the tragic man of rock and roll. But if you ask anybody that was around Roy for more than 10 minutes, they always remember the humor and that laugh.
And Alex is with us now. Very good morning to you, Alex. Do you just want to explain, who are we hearing from then? So it's Roy Jr. we heard from.
Yep, and then that's my mom, Barbara.
Yes, and Roy Jr. was describing, that's your child that
yeah.
he was talking about.
Yep, that's the soundtrack of my life.
Which was an extraordinary time, wasn't it? But before we get on to some of the other things that emerged from the documentary, just remind people of those tragedies that so many people associated with your dad's life. First of all, losing his first wife.
Yeah, Claudette. And Claudette, my dad, actually had got divorced and after Oh Pretty Woman, 64, 65, and then they had reunited. And she was back for like 6 months and got killed in a motorcycle accident. And she was behind him, and I guess he made the light, and she was trying to catch up or something, and a big truck pulled out in front of her.
And he was left with 3 boys.
Yep, Roy Dwayne, Anthony King, and Wesley.
And then just pick the story up some years later. He's actually on tour here in the UK, isn't he?
Yeah.
And then has the most dreadful news.
Yep, 2 years later, and I think it was in Bournemouth, finishing the tour, literally showing photos of the boys saying, good job, team, and band played great. I can't wait to get home to my kids. And then they knocked on the door, an hour later or 2 hours later, and there was a fire at our home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and the house burned down, and there was an explosion, and ended up killing the 2 oldest boys, and Wesley and my grandparents survived.
Now, anyone who's experienced tragedy like that, you can't imagine how anyone comes back from that. But he did, and his music continued as he also forged a new life with your mum. Yeah,
and just to stay on the tragedy part, often we have to skip past it because it's impossible to know what my dad was thinking through this phase. And so the meat of this documentary is this amazing interview my dad. It was like a no-holds-barred, ask the questions, and he walks you through exactly what he was thinking. And we've protected this footage, for the last,
When was that he spoke about that?
It was 1983 or 4 or something. It was right as he was going to do his comeback, and they were going to do a movie at that point, and so they were doing research, and they wanted to know the whole story, and so it's just sat until now.
And there is, you say, Alex, there's compelling footage in this, not least because some of I think I speak for a lot of people saying that they think of your dad as being someone who had so much grief in his life, a lot of sadness, and then they look at the songs and they say, well, they think of crying, and they think of those numbers, and they think, well, here is a man who is living his grief through his music. But a lot of the interviews just say that's not really what it was like. Yeah,
and it's almost inverse. He wrote all these tragic songs when things were good. And then after the tragedies, actually, he didn't do a lot of songwriting for the middle of the 70s. He kind of backed away because he would say, when my heart's broken, I can't write about heartbreak. It's only when things are all perfect that I can really, really write well. And so, and he was just such a funny guy. And so when people would meet him, he had these one-liners, very quick, and just an amazing guy. So it is switched around.
Well, after the tragedy, he met your mum.
Yep.
And you came along.
Yeah, and So he met my mom actually here in Leeds. My mom's German.
Well, we're in Manchester, but just across the way from Leeds.
Yeah. But rather than, because she was German,
States.
she snuck out to go to a nightclub and she ended up in the UK. And so that's what I meant by here. And so they met together. So, if him being from the States, obviously.
So growing up with him, with your dad, you said he was funny.
Yeah.
I mean, because I suppose people imagine what was he like in terms of as a musician? They always seem so elusive, don't they? But as a family man, was he a family man?
Yeah, he was. And you're right, you've struck on it. I always say my dad was so available for us kids. And a lot of the big stars are even elusive for their families. They're just like, they're these characters, and they don't break that, or they don't have another side. My dad really was a tender family man, and just we had to give him a day off when he got back from touring, and just let him sleep or whatever. And then after that little period, he was just whatever we were doing, he wanted to get into.
Archive footage is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And you've got some clips of some of the TV appearances he made over here.
Yeah.
And people slightly taking the mickey out of the sunglasses, which people are always fascinated. Why always the sunglasses?
Yeah, and so the story that's great. He needed the prescriptive glasses to read, and so he had reading glasses and clear glasses and his dark shades. And so he put his regular glasses down on the plane and left them. And it was just before a tour with a band called the Beatles in 1963. And so he flew over here and wasn't able, and he said he was so embarrassed because he had to wear his dark shades on. And by the third night, the kids were all looking for the guy with the shades. So.
And it became just a calling card. It was like, that's who he was.
Yeah.
I was struck by your eyes, and I did just ask you before we started, before we came back from to talk to you, if you had the same eyes as your dad.
Exactly the same.
Same colour.
Same colour, exactly.
Because it's not something you really...
And the same prescription. So I had the surgery. So I literally had the big, thick glasses for my whole life. And my dad's hair was actually around my shade as well. And he dyed it black. And so he dyed his hair black and had the shades and did the whole thing.
I tell you what, there's so many fascinating things about documentary, but one of the glorious things is it is an opportunity just to revisit some of his music. And people, I think, sometimes forget just how beautiful songs were. Yeah,
they don't forget in the UK we have a top 10 album right now called The Love So Beautiful, Roy Orbison and the Royal Philharmonic. And it's just a fantastic representation of my dad's hits. And it's really, really nice to get back to the records. And, this documentary is all about the family and stuff. And it is interesting because it really makes you want to listen to the music.
Alex, I'd really love to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in for us.
The documentary is called Love Hurts. It's on BBC 4 at 9:30 tomorrow night. And as mentioned, the album is called A Love So Beautiful.
That's it for us today. Back tomorrow at 6.
Now it's time for Island Medics.